Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nurlina. I'm from 7A English Department, and here I want to present about interlanguage. So I will explain what is interlanguage. The term interlanguage was initially processed by Larry Salinker, state that interlanguage is a linguistic system that is used by the language secondlers and it is influenced by the language first or mother tongue. When the learners learn the target language, the learners build their own system of language which is different from their language first. For the first concept, interlanguage can be defined as a halfway house between language first and language second. Language first can be said as a language source which contains the first material and mixed with the target language gradually. Sophie Drake named interlanguage as a transfer, meaning a transition of pure knowledge from language first to language second. As one of the processes that is employed in interlanguage development, she identifies two types of transfer: positive transfer and negative transfer. Positive transfer, when a language first structure or rule is used in a language second and that use is appropriate or correct in the language second. Meanwhile, a negative transfer, when a language first and language second and that use in inappropriate and considered an error. There are 5 central processes that exist central to second language learner. First, language transfer. Second, transfer of training. Third, second language learner. Fourth, strategy of second language communication. And fifth, over generation of linguistic material. Several research pointed out that the language of language second learners is systematic, which leads of rules government behavior. This brings a conception that interlanguage is based on the proposal that language second learners have internalized a mental grammar, a natural language system that can be described in terms of linguistic rules and principles. Based on the theory, we can conclude that interlanguage is an ideology that has been developed by learners of a second language, which preserve some features of their first language and can also overgeneralize some language second writing and speaking rules. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Sri Handayani and now I want to explain about the characteristic of interlanguage. An interlanguage has the following characteristic. For the first, systematic. At any particular point or stage of development, the interlanguage is governed by rules which constitute the learner's internal grammar. These rules are discoverable by analyzing the language that is used by the learner at the time. And second, dynamic. The system of rules which learners have in their mind changes frequently or is in the state of flux, resulting in a succession of intern grammars. Slinkers view these changes not as a steady progression along a continuum. The third, variable. Although the IL is systematic, difference in context result and different patterns of language use. 4. Reduced system, both in form and in function. The characteristic of reduced form refers to the less complex grammatical structures that typically occur in an interlanguage compared to the target language. Okay, I think enough. Thank you.
The third, factors affecting interlanguage or aspect of interlanguage. Interlanguage has been widely influenced by several factors. In this case, we conclude such influence from perspective of social, discourse, psycholinguistics, and linguistics as elaborated by Rod Ellis. A. Social aspect of interlanguage. From the social angle, Ellis introduced three different approaches of interlanguage. The first, interlanguage improves a stylistic continuum that learners develop a capability for using the second language which is based on all regular language behavior and produce an abstract linguistic system. The second is in constructing their interlanguage, learners use the input influenced by social factors. Along with this, John Schumann proposed the acculturation model of second language acquisition. He found fossilization of second language learners when they fail to acculturate to the target language. Groups that they are unable or unwilling to adapt to a new culture. The main reasons of this failure are social distance and psychological distance, such as language shock and motivation. And the last is to save their opportunities to speak and to learn. And second language, learners negotiate their social identities in their interaction with native speakers. The fourth aspect of interlanguage. Through this aspect, Rod Ellis suggests the role of input and interaction and the role of output in second language acquisition as follows. The first, behaviorist views language learning determined from environment. It is controlled from the outset through stimulus and the reinforcement. The second, mentalists suggest the importance of the learner's black box. Learners are already equipped with brain ability to learn language and that they need minimal exposure to the acquisition. The third, interactionists emphasize the importance of both input and internal language processing. The role of output in second language acquisition. Swain argued that comprehensible output plays some important roles in second language acquisition, such as the first is it serves learners' consciousness and helps them to notice gaps in their interlanguage. The second is it helps learners to test hypotheses that they can try some rules and see the feedback, positive or negative. The third, it gives chance to them to talk about their own output, identify some problems in it and discuss solutions to fix it. C. Psycholinguistic aspect of interlanguage. Rod Ellis defines psycholinguistics as the study of the mental structure and process involved in the acquisition and use of language. In this field, we focus on some of major issues: first, language transfer and the role of consciousness. The first language transfer. First language transfer is the influence that the learner's first language exerts over the acquisition of an second language.
The influence can be seen as the first source of error in learner language or negative transfer, the second specialization of second language acquisition or positive transfer, the third avoidance, and the last overuse. The second, the role of consciousness in second language acquisition. Richard Smith distinguished the term consciousness into the first intentionality, a conscious and deliberate decision of a learner to learn some second language knowledge, and the second, intention, in which he proposed noticing, that is, the process of attending consciously to linguistic features in the input. In addition, he introduced awareness, which refers to whether learners are conscious of acquiring a new second language element. The linguistic aspects of interlanguage. In this section, Rod Ellis considers how the nature of the language influences development. The first, typological universal. The typological study of language gives interesting predictions about what learners will acquire first and what they will transfer from their first language. Moreover, linguistic facts can be used to explain and even predict acquisition, and the result of empirical studies of second language can be used to refine our understanding of linguistic facts. The second, universal grammar. Noam Chomsky argues that language is governed by a set of highly abstract principles that provide parameters which are given particular setting in different languages. It serves as a source of hypotheses about what structures will cause learning difficulty and determines whether second language and first language are the same or differ. The third, learning ability, is that the children have to rely on innate knowledge of language, and that they need stimulus, positive and negative evidence. The last, access to universal grammar. A complete access is that the learners begin with the parameter setting of their first language but subsequently learn to switch to the second language parameter setting, and that full target language competence is possible and no critical period lies. B. No access is that UG is not available to adult second language learners, that they will normally not be able to achieve full competence. C. Partial access is that learners only have some part of UG. Second language acquisition is partly regulated by UG and partly by general learning strategies. D. Dual access is that adult second language learners make use of both UG and general learning strategies, and that they can be fully successful providing they rely on UG. And the last, Magnus refers to the general idea that some structures are more natural or basic than other structures. Research shows that learners are likely to acquire a frequent but marked structure before an infrequent but unmarked structure than vice versa.
Hello everyone, my name is Anissa Syafurti, and in this video I wanted to explain about states in interlanguage. In this initial state, language 1, grammar is affecting much. Signs. Language 2 acquisition follow language 1 acquisition, a major component of the initial state form. Language 2 learning must be prior knowledge of language 1. Next, intermediate stage covers all stages of basic language development, including the maturational change which take place in so-called child grammar and the language to developmental sequence which is known as learner language, also interlanguage or interlanguage. In this phase, both process of language 1 and language 2 development are happening. All language 2 learners will go through this stage before reaching the final stage. And the last is final stage. The final stage represents the end of the product of language transfer which is the outcome of language 1 and language 2 learning. In the language 2 context, language 2 final state in native or native-like competence. Although it might be impossible that one could be native or for his language 2. If the intermediate stage undergoes positive transfer, some learners reach near native or native-like competence in language 2 along with native competence in language 1. Okay, next explanation is about error analysis implication for language teacher. Error analysis could provide language teachers rich information about their learners' progress in the language 2 learning process. Error tell the teacher how far towards the goal the learner has progressed and what remains for him to learn. Next, B. Error analysis implication for syllabus designers. As an important part in English teaching course, syllabus should be designed as such that it fits all aspects succeeding language 2 learning process. There are many factors to be considered to decide on what to teach to what level and age group. Okay, the second explanation is issue in interlanguage. During the process of interlanguage or the transitional competence, some issues emerge as the consequence of a transfer between the first language acquisition into the target language acquisition. In a smaller context, the issue is related to the acquirers side or the learners, relating to errors, mistakes, learning strategies, and fossilization. In the broader one, the issue is related to the outer aspect of the learner himself, namely the new varieties of English, also known as word Englishes. Its of issue is defined as follows: A. Interlanguage versus error and fossilization. Errors are distinguished from mistakes, where errors mean the errors reflects gaps in a learner's knowledge, occur because the learner does not know what is correct. Mistakes reflect occasional lapses in performance, occur because the learner is unable to perform what he or she knows. As an example, in past tense sentences, when a learner consistently uses "got" as the past verb for go, due to his knownness that when is the correct past verb from go, this can be considered as an error. Next, B. Interlanguage and learning strategies. Salinker postulates that interlanguage is the product of 5 central cognitive processes involved in language 2 acquisition, language transfer, transfer of training, strategies of learning and language 2, strategies of communication and language 2, and organization of linguistic material. Language learner strategies appear to be central to this theory, according to which interlanguage evolves over time as a result of various strategies that learners use to make sense of the language input and to control the output. Next, C. Interlanguage versus New English varieties. Referring back to Celine Kern's notion about interlanguage, which state that productive performance in the target language, or TL, by second language learner, which is essential to that produced by the native speaker of that TL. It is now become quite confusing about who are natives. Next, pedagogical implication of interlanguage. Some above mentioned issues in interlanguage or errors, fossilization, learning strategies, and varieties of English bring some implication for pedagogical practice. Some other implications are discussed as follows. 1. Explicit versus implicit grammar teaching. 2. Error analysis and pedagogical improvement. Okay, that's all from me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.